Oh. Good evening and welcome to tonight's 10-Mile River Scout Museum presents a program of virtual talks. And tonight we're going to be discussing monarch butterflies. My name is Mitchell Slepian and I'm the chairman of the museum. And I'm really excited that everybody is joining us for our second talk that we are doing this spring. And I'm happy to say that our frequent presenter, Glenn Pontier, is back again. He's our museum co-director, and we'll talk a little bit more about his bio as we get a little bit into the program, but let's talk about our museum first. Okay, so the 10-Mile River Scout Camp Museum is on the property of 10-Mile River Scout Camps, and give me one moment to get the slideshow going. Okay, so here we go. Here is the map of the 10-Mile River Scout Camps area, and you can take a look at it for a second or two, and you can see some of our current operating camps, which include Camp Aquahunga and Kiowa, and of course, Family Camp. And jumping into the history of the museum. The museum was started in 1997, and it's dedicated to preserving the history and artifacts of the 10-Mile River Scout Camps and the local area. You can take a virtual tour of our museum at 10mileriversmuseum.org/historian. And you can learn more about our programs by visiting our website, tmrmuseum.org, our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube accounts, which are quite active. Every day we have something new, and you can take a look at pictures of campers from years ago and see yourself if what you might have looked like back when you were in Kunitar or Katoki or some of the other camps at Wahunga back in the 50s and 60s. And then you can also contact the museum by calling us at 845-252-2063. You can email us at questions@tmrmuseum.org, or if you want to talk to me, happy to answer any questions, chairman@tmrmuseum@gmail.com. And just so that we're using Zoom tonight, which I think everybody these days is familiar with Zoom, and the best way to watch it if you're not is to just click on speaker and you will see Glenn and his PowerPoint, and he'll be able to give you the best presentation that way. Next. And at the end of the talk, we're going to take questions and we will answer everything to the best of our ability. If we don't know the answer tonight, we will try and get back to you via email. And again, you can always email me if something pops into your head tomorrow. And you can look at the chat box on the bottom. You can make comments about the presentation, add things to it, or ask your general questions, and Glenn and I will be happy to answer. Okay. If you want to become a member of the museum, you can visit the website for more information, and we're always happy to welcome new members, and you get a couple of great benefits that the website will tell you about. You can take a virtual tour, again, at tmrmuseum.org/historian, and scouts can earn the TMR Historical Trails Award. And it's basically by doing some hiking around the camp, and there are different pins that you can get, 50 miles, 30, or 14, and it's a lot of fun for those of you who like hiking, and you can see some beautiful sights along the camp. Okay, now I want to turn over to Glenn and give Glenn a moment, and I'm going to stop sharing and let Glenn share his screen. And before we get Glenn started, while he's doing it, just so you know, Glenn is our co-director. He's been with us for several years, and he has a lot of experience in the area of 10-Mile River Scout Camps. He was the editor at the River Reporter. He was the director at the Sullivan Renaissance Catskill and Fly Fishing Museum, and he was the public information officer for Sullivan County. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn.
Well, hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here. And what I'm going to do is share my screen. So you're not going to see me, and that might please you. But you are going to see a PowerPoint that I put together about monarch butterflies. So let me get to my screen here. So here we go. This is talk a little bit about monarch butterflies, which are just a remarkable insect, a remarkable creature, and live all over the United States and Mexico and other parts of the world. But we have them here at the 10-mile river. And they're so amazing because while they live at camp in the summer, in the winter, they go to Mexico. These are butterflies. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. And I'll tell you how this story started. I'm not a lepidopterist or a scientist. I'm a historian. But my co-director, Ira Nagel, hangs out baskets of flowers every year to beautify the museum. And last summer, I noticed that there were butterflies flitting from one of the baskets to the other. And I looked at it a little more closely, and it turned out to be a monarch butterfly. Well, I'm familiar with monarchs, and so Ira and I went looking for milkweed, which is where the monarchs they turn from caterpillars to butterflies on this plant. And sure enough, we found milkweed maybe 100 yards from the museum. And unfortunately, a little bit later in the summer, when one of the rangers was trimming the weeds along the roadway, he cut down the milkweed. And he didn't know what it was. So that inspired me to look for a little bit of funding and to put together a program that would be educational, informational, to talk about these remarkable butterflies. So here we go. We're going to talk first a little bit about the butterfly itself. And then I'm going to talk about milkweed, which is this remarkable, while the butterflies are remarkable, so too is the plant that they live on. And then we'll talk a little bit about Mexico. Mexico, right? Wouldn't you like to go to Mexico every winter? So this is what the monarchs look like. It's bigger than the actual monarch, which is 3 or 4 inches wide in its wingspan. You notice the 2 little dots on the lower portion on either side of the torso. That means it's a male. The females look identical, but without the dots. They're always orange in color. But the orange is caused by scales that have the color. And which happens sometimes, they lose some of their hue and they become more whitish. Of course, they're butterflies. And if you know about butterflies, then you know that they're like moths. They start out as caterpillars, and then they go through a stage where they transform into these flying insects. So the monarchs, when they're caterpillars, they're voracious eaters, and they eat milkweed. And we'll get into that. This shows another male butterfly. Interesting is that let me get, the monarchs lay the eggs. When they're butterflies, they lay the eggs on the milkweed plant, and the egg then develops and becomes a caterpillar, and it eats the milkweed. And milkweed contains a toxin, and the toxin is poisonous, obviously, and that's what allows the butterfly and the caterpillar to be protected, because birds and other predators realize that brightly colored insects or amphibians are poisonous. And the little red Fs that you see in the spring, the animals don't eat them because the orange tells them that they're poisonous. They live 2 to 6 weeks, except one generation, and we'll talk about that, lives 7 to 8 months. They smell and taste through their antennae and legs, and it helps them find the milkweed where they can lay their eggs. And a female butterfly will lay 300 to 500 eggs in the wild. There are captive monarchs that are used to reproduce, and they'll lay more eggs. So the cycle of a butterfly, and this is true for all butterflies, particularly for the monarch, is they start out, the butterfly lays an egg. It does it on the underside of, in the monarch's case, the underside of a piece of milkweed. And the egg hatches into a caterpillar. And the caterpillar has this voracious appetite and it eats the milkweed plant. And it grows to be bigger and bigger. And eventually, when it reaches its final development, it spins a chrysalis, kind of a cocoon. It's in the pupa stage. And while it's in this cocoon, it transforms from a caterpillar into a butterfly. And then it hatches from the chrysalis and it's the milkweed again. And then it lays eggs, it mates, and then lays eggs and starts the cycle over again. Now that shows the size of the egg on the bottom of a milkweed plant. And you see how small the egg is. Well, imagine, right? That's a thumb magnified quite a lot. So the egg is very tiny. If you see one, let it be. This shows the caterpillar to butterfly development stage. And on the left, you see the caterpillar, then it spins the chrysalis, and it hibernates in there for a couple of weeks or so, and it transforms into this butterfly. And then it breaks out of the chrysalis. And as it does, it's like hatches, like a little chick hatches from an egg, and it becomes this gorgeous butterfly. Monarchs, they're this bright orange color, very vivid, easy to identify. They do look a lot like another butterfly, which is called a Viceroy. And if you see that on the right of your screen, you see the monarch, and this is a female, it doesn't have the two little black dots, but you can see in the middle part of the wing, there's no line. And on the Viceroy, you'll see a line that crosses. Otherwise, they look identical or very, very close. The Viceroys are a little bit smaller than monarchs. When they're caterpillars, they don't look at all alike. But as butterflies, they appear quite similar. But this is the monarch. You learned a little bit about this butterfly. Again, I'm not a scientist. This is stuff I've learned because I'm interested in them and I'm an amateur. Now, on the left, you see milkweed. And you may have noticed this. It's not really a weed, it's a flower. Of course, it's called milkweed. And this shows on the left side of the screen a butterfly on the milkweed. Although butterflies don't generally rely on the milkweed plant for their food, but the caterpillar relies on the milkweed plant for its food. So once it develops a butterfly, the butterfly then flies off to other flowers, any real flowering native plant, which is why when Ira purchased those hanging baskets, the butterflies were attracted to the flowers because of the color and because they have these scent glands on their legs and their antennae. Milkweed provides all the nourishment that a milkweed needs to transform. And the monarchs, they go through several generations. And so in the spring, the female will lay the eggs on a young milkweed plant. Later in the summer, the female will lay eggs on a plant, even if it's past the flowering stage. So they rely on this plant in order to lay the eggs and have the caterpillars eat. Now, there are a lot of different species of milkweed, and this shows 4 of them, about 30 by the monarchs. And they're specific to the regions. So if you're interested in planting milkweed, which is a terrific idea, and I'm going to make some other suggestions, uh, you plant the milkweed, and so you should find a variety that's native to this area or common to this area. One of them is called common milkweed. One of them is called swamp milkweed. These are both kinds. There are prettier versions you might want for the color in your garden, but you should really plant one that will allow the butterflies to live. You can buy seeds. You could buy little plants. I just ordered seeds from Walmart online 2 days ago. I have milkweed that grows kind of naturally in my yard, but it didn't come up so far. Now that's okay because milkweed doesn't generally grow up until late spring or early summer. So it still may grow, but you could plant now. So if you can find these, you can help these butterflies. And this shows protecting the milkweed by putting a kind of netting on top so that no other bugs will eat it. A lot of bugs are attracted to it. Milkweed, of course, has this sap that's attractive to a number of insects. It has toxins in it, so that doesn't affect a lot of the insects. So they like it, and it protects them, which is why the caterpillars like it. Here's an interesting thing about milkweed. It was used and has been used medicinally by some indigenous peoples, but it's used to this day by hunters. And I don't know how many of you listening are hunters, but in the fall, once the milkweed dries out, it forms these pods. And when they dry, they break open, and there's this very airy fiber that carries the seed. And so a hunter will find a milkweed pod and break it open and take the fibers and throw them in the air. And the wind will take them and will fly with the milkweed pods, with the fibers. And that will show where the scent of the hunter is. So if you're deer hunting or turkey hunting and you want to make sure that you're downwind from your prey, you would use milkweed. It's an old trick. Some hunters use powder or some kind of smoke to measure the wind and the scent. But the traditional way to do it is to use milkweed. Interesting use. I just want to talk about pollinators because the butterflies are what are called pollinators, and since they go from one plant to another, they pick up pollen on their legs, and then when they go to the next plant, they leave some of the pollen, and that's what causes plants to reproduce by having the pollen transferred from one plant to the next. And of course, bees are the most important pollinator, the one you think of first. But there are 100,000 or so insects and invertebrates that pollinate, including birds and hummingbirds and others. So without pollinators, we don't have plants that can develop because the plants have developed in such a way that they rely on these other helpers. And so the use of pesticides and the loss of habitat has cut down on the number of pollinators. So one reason why people are trying to cut down on the use of pesticides and increase the number of pollinators. So there are a number of plants that you can put in your garden that will attract pollinators, butterflies, bees, and other beetles, hummingbirds, and this helps. And I'll tell you, this is a problem on a macro scale. but your little ability to help makes a difference. So you can help by planting native species because that's what the pollinators are used to. They're the plants that have always been here, the ones they use. You can become what's called a wildlife gardener who plants flowers deliberately to attract wildlife. You can avoid using pesticides. And there are a lot of natural pesticides. You can use vinegar and other things as opposed to chemical pesticides. You can plant milkweed, which is just this great attractive plant. You can protect grasslands. And, I know I like a nice trim lawn and part of my property that I live on, but the rest of it I let grow. You can post a yard sign that tells people what you're doing so they understand that your yard is serving to help pollinators. And then you can spread the word. So if you're kind of media savvy and you buy into what we're talking about, you can help. Now, I'm going to talk about Mexico because this butterfly flies to Mexico. Now, I think of fish that swim from the Delaware River down to the Sargasso Sea, the eel, or I think of shad that live in the ocean and come up to Delaware to spawn. And you think of birds, the bald eagle that flies down from Canada to here, or the songbirds, the robins that head south. I can understand that. I'm not quite sure how they do it, but a butterfly, think about that, a butterfly that flies from the 10-mile river to Mexico. So there's a biosphere northwest of Mexico City, and in the fall, a billion butterflies from all over North America head south and fly to this one 50 or 60 acre place in Mexico. And it's in the spring, the butterflies come back, and we'll talk a little bit about how that works. But in the fall, this super generation of monarch butterfly flies all the way from the 10-mile river to this place near Mexico City. So when they get in Mexico City, they hang out on the fir trees in these two Mexican states. And here's a map that shows where you can see the map of Mexico in the upper left, and then just a little below, it breaks into that. And then on the right, it shows some of the areas where the trees are and where the butterflies go to. So the butterfly colonies, again, from some of them come from as far as Canada, from Ontario, others from the West, but in the Northeast, flying all the way to Mexico every year. All right. This is what it looks like around those trees. You can imagine if there's millions, multiple millions of butterflies, and maybe a billion of them. And when they get there, they're just this huge concentration of, we see them singularly, or maybe a couple or three or four. I've never seen more than three or four at one time. And they so cover the trees. These are green trees that look orange. And they're orange because of the butterflies. You see, it's an amazing, I hope sometime in the next future on my bucket list is to actually go visit this area and to see this phenomenon. And so here's the map. And in the winter, let's start at the bottom. That's where they spend the winter. And then in the spring, you see the yellow arrows. And the first generation flies from the wintering ground up to Texas. And it stops and it lays its eggs. And it takes 6 or 7 weeks till it grows to its full capacity. And then it flies up to North Carolina or so, or Virginia. And it lays its eggs and it spends another 6 or 8 weeks there. And then it flies up to our area, to New Jersey and New York. Eggs. And some go further. And then it lives all summer. It may lay another generation. And then in the fall, this super generation. The eggs are laid in late August, or early September, and they hatch and they bulk up on a lot of the plants, and they fly all the way back to Mexico. And just look at that map, right? They're flying down through the Carolinas, Alabama, Mississippi, down past Texas. All think about that. I mean, past the cities, past, a butterfly, right? A puff of wind comes and fly, and that's this butterfly. And again, it takes 3 generations to get them up to where we live, or as far as north as Canada. And any time they lay an egg, it becomes a caterpillar, then a pupa, then a butterfly, and then they fly a little further north. To me, this is just incredible. So the super generation, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that's the one that's born in late August or early September, and they travel and they live longer than the 4 or 5 generations that took to get them here. So there's one generation of butterfly, again, flies all the way from here in New York, where we live, all the way down to Mexico. Just truly amazing. So just another map to show this. This is showing them flying back down to that area outside of Mexico City, 100 kilometers or so. We're not exactly sure how they do this. Some people think they follow the river. So anecdotally, we know that the byway along the Delaware River, that the butterflies travel down that, but how they then move from Delaware Bay inland a little bit through the Carolinas, maybe Tennessee, and they go all the way down. Just amazing. And those are our butterflies. They're also coming from the Midwest and from the east side of the Rocky Mountains. So from the Dakotas, and Iowa, they're flying, and they're all joining it. Of course, you saw those pictures. How do we know what they do? Well, a lot of people are interested in this, and there's an organization called Monarch Watch, and I put its the website down there. You can tag the butterflies, and there are people that they find a butterfly, they capture it. Of course, they get the tagging material. They put one of the little tagging buttons on the butterfly wing, and then they release it. The butterfly goes, and then when other people find the butterfly, they can look at the tag and they can look it up and see where it was tagged originally. And this is one of the ways that we use to track them. So as we try to find out kind of how they move around. Now, let me just stop here for a minute and say, in the last, I would say, dozen years or so, monarch butterflies' habitat has been lessened. And where there may be several 100 million or even 1 billion butterflies that make it to Mexico, there used to be 100 times that. All right. And as their habitat has been destroyed, as farmers have cut down the milkweed, as road crews have trimmed weeds and from the sides of roads, all of this is cut down because the monarchs only lay eggs on milkweed. So there's been a whole movement to try to understand what their flight patterns are, where they go, and how we can increase. So if you have a garden or a yard and you want to help, then plant some milkweed. And eventually, the monarchs will find it and they'll lay eggs and you'll have monarch butterflies. You can also plant any kind of butterfly plant, a plant that becomes food for butterflies, because the ones that are born in August and September, they need a lot of food to bulk up. They're traveling 2,000 or 3,000 miles. All right, this is a butterfly, remember? So it's important enough to make an exhibit at the museum. And this kind of shows where the museum, what our exhibit looks like. This is a little close-up. And the monarchs have been added to the endangered species list because this remarkable creature, may not be around, and it needs habitat. It needs people to use less pesticides. It needs not hybrid flowers, but native flowers. So come on in and take a look at our exhibit. And if you're a scout, there are a number of merit badges that kind of explore and inform the discussion of monarch butterflies. So, if you're into gardening or insect study, or if you know of somebody that wants to do a merit badge, this is a way to understand monarch butterflies better. And monarch butterflies, it may be something that will contribute to part of your merit badge. So our exhibit is going to include this sign, or a sign similar to this, outside the museum near where the milkweed was, so that no longer will somebody inadvertently cut it down. And as scouts hike by, they'll stop and they'll look and they'll see, what this plant is and what it does. The whole project, which has been created for the museum, was kind of my idea, but it was designed by Doreen Warner from W Design, who's also the woman who created the brochure that's used by the Upper Delaware Scenic Byway. And it was the Upper Delaware Scenic Byway that has a grant to help people promote the awareness and protection of monarch butterflies, because they call it the flyway on the byway, because the monarchs use the byway to get to Mexico. So come on to the museum. We're open on June 10th and 11th. We're also open almost every day in July and August. And we're closed some days, but you can find out the exact dates by looking at our website. And we're also open by appointment. So if you're interested in, a special trip during the middle of the week or on a weekend, and you want to come look at our monarch exhibit and all of our exhibits, because it's really an amazing museum. There's a lot about the local area, and of course, a lot about scouting and scouting at 10 Mile River. So I want to thank everybody. I'm going to turn this back over to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn this back over to Mitchell and see if there are any questions. So Mitchell.
Thank you, Glenn. This was really, really great. I'm going to share my screen for a minute, and let's see. Looks like your screen is still being shared. So we go to mine. One second. Okay. Actually, so I noticed a number of questions, Glenn, and some of the questions we had are, what is the adult lifespan of a butterfly?
Well, the different butterflies have different lifespans, and again, I'm not a lepidopterist. I'm not an expert on butterflies, but the monarchs live. The normal generation of monarchs live 6 to 8 weeks. All right. So from the time it hatches as an egg to the time it becomes a full-fledged butterfly and lays another egg is 6 to 8 weeks. However, the super generation lives 6 to 8 months. All right. And How they know to do this, I don't know that anyone knows how they know to do this, but there's some butterflies that live only a day. But the monarchs typically live, and when I say live, they're not butterflies that whole time, since a large part of that time they're caterpillars. Remember, it's an egg, it's a caterpillar, it's a pupa, then it's a butterfly. So that whole process takes 6 to 8 weeks.
Great. And then the next question, is the super generation that migrates to Mexico physically different than prior generations?
I here again, these are great questions. Clearly, there's something different. So how it physically knows, how it's able to live. I mean, think about it, right? The human lifespan is, 70, 80 years, 100 years. And if all of a sudden you had a human being that could live, 10 times as long, you would say, what's the difference? I don't know. There must be some difference in the genetic makeup. Again, these are great questions. It's beyond my ability, but it's a great question. I do know that planting plants in the fall, in the late summer and fall, planting flowering plants that butterflies can eat helps the super generation, because they have to bulk up and they fly and then they stop along the way and they eat plants. So as they're heading south, they're stopping along different sites and eating the nectar from flowers all along the way until they get down to Mexico.
Great. And then a couple of quick comments and one final question, unless something else flows into us, which is fine. Melissa Lambert heads, one of our participants, wrote, thank you for the presentation. She's a huge monarch fan and she is a scientist. Although she hasn't formally studied monarchs, she said it's primarily East Coast, Midwest monarchs that go to Mexico, and most that's Midwest, and most West Coast monarchs over the winter go to California. And she has seen them in Cape May, New Jersey, as well as Pismo Beach, California, and in Mexico, and said it's unimaginable to see them in these spots. And it's a super generation. It's called the Methuselah generation, and it's definitely worth the trip. And we have another question.
Wait, Mitchell, let's just pause on that, because her comments are just wonderful. So thank you so much, because again, you know about the different generations, and if you've seen them in Mexico, I know that if you live in New York City, you have monarchs there. So they can live in Staten Island, they can live in Queens. So you could plant a milkweed there. So don't despair. Yes, you've seen them you can see them in Cape Cod, you can see them as far as north, as I said, as Ontario or Quebec.
Yeah, and I agree, Glenn. The comments were fantastic. And then another question. Approximately when do the monarch butterflies come up to during the summer to our area?
So we should see monarchs in July. It's
Great.
possible that some might come a little earlier in June, but by end of June or July, we will see monarchs here. And I know that because I've seen them in July. I've seen them maybe the beginning of July. As the climate becomes warmer, some of the insects and all are coming earlier. I don't think we'll see them in May. They're still on their journey north. If you're down in North Carolina, you might see them in May. If you're in Texas, you might see them in April or even March. But we'll see them here in July.
Great. And I think that's it on questions. I'm going to go back to a screen share for 1 minute. Give me one moment. Just go back into PowerPoint and we will wrap things up. Okay, so a couple of quick things. Again, if you wish to become a member of the museum, you can go to our website, www.museum.org, www.tmrscoutmuseum.org, and you can find out the information about membership and some of the benefits. And as Glenn mentioned, we might see Monarchs coming up to camp in July. August 4th through 5th, for those who are scouts or scouters, is Alumni Weekend at TMR Scout Camps. And there is information you could find to sign up for that on all of our social media feeds and on the website. And to come up to the camp and see the butterflies, that would be great. We'd love to see everyone at Alumni Day. And special bonus during Alumni Day, on the Saturday of that weekend, August 5th, from 9 to 3, we're running our third classic car show, which we've been running since 2019. We took a little break during the COVID years when we were not running the full programs, but we had a great show last year. We had, every year we've done it, we've had 15 to 20 classic cars from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and a lot of really interesting things. So if you want to register your car, if you have one, you're welcome to do it. You just register it that morning. And if you just want to come and see the cars, come up to Alumni Weekend and you'll have a really great time. And next thing is, all of us are volunteers with the museum. So if anybody wishes to make a donation, you're welcome to do so. And you can do it at tmrmuseum.org/donate. And that's where you could also become a member. And besides any type of financial donations, we also accept Scout uniforms, patches, or anything that you may have. And if you're interested in donating some of that, feel free to email us and we'll be happy to work with you on that. And look for more programs on our website and social media feeds. And I hopefully we'll see everybody again in the fall when we do some more talks. And on that note, I want to thank Glenn, everybody who commented and showed up, and looking forward to seeing everybody in future webinars, and really looking forward to seeing everybody at Alumni Day this August. Take care and have a really great night, everybody. Thank you.